All right, in this third video, we're going to bring together some of the algebraic concepts we've been working on with completing the square and factoring. And we're going to apply those to equations of the circle when the equation's not yet written in standard form. So let's take a look at this quick review of the standard equation of a circle. We said that if h comma k represents the center, then we could write the equation in the form of x minus h, that quantity squared, plus y minus k, that quantity squared, and that's equal to the radius squared. All right, so our goal is going to be transforming what we're given into that structure. So there's three general steps that we're going to follow. When we do this, the first thing we're going to do is regroup all of our x terms together and our y terms together. And I wrote over here, we're also going to send the constant over. So this says, and move, that's supposed to be a v, and move the constant term. So if we have a constant on the left side of our equal sign, we're going to send it over to the right side. For part two, if you have a linear term for x and or y, that's the expression we're going to use to complete the square. So we're going to complete the square and balance the equation. And then lastly, the last step is just factoring and simplifying. So let's look at this first example. So in step one, when it says regroup x and y terms together, here's what I mean. We have a quadratic x squared term, so I'm just going to leave it by itself. There's no linear term for x, so there's no like 6x, for example. However, we do have both a quadratic y term, y squared, and a linear y term, 4y. So we're going to put those two in parentheses together. And then the 14, the constant, is already on the side that we want it to be. So I said move the constant to the other side. As I'm looking at, as I'm looking at these three examples, the constant's already over there. But if this was equal to 0, for example, we would move the 14 to the other side. All right, so now the only step where we have to complete the square is this step. Or this part, the y squared plus 4y part. So just like we did in the last work we've been doing algebraically, we're going to complete the square, y squared plus 4y. So if I think about it, y squared plus 4y, I need to know what number completes that square. I'm going to keep my x squared out here and my 14 over there to the right. So just like we did before, take that middle term and cut it in half. So half of 4y is 2y, square the 2, and this becomes a 4. But here's the thing. We can't just add 4 to the left side of the equation. We have to balance the equation. So when we add 4 to the left, we can also add 4 to the right. By adding 4 to each side, that's just that addition property of equality that allows us to add the same number to both sides. So that's what I mean by complete the square and balance the equation. So then the last step is we're going to factor the left side. X squared stays by itself. It doesn't change. When we factor y squared plus 4y plus 4, well, this is where we can do the shortcut we just went over. The square root of the first term is just y. The sign of the middle term is addition, so it remains plus. And then the square root of the third term, the square root of 4, is 2. So that factors to y plus 2 squared. And then on the right side, we're just going to combine our like terms, 14 plus 4. And that is, 18? All right, so this is the equation of our circle. So the center is at 0, -2, and the radius is the square root of 18, which is like 4 point something. I'm just going to write it as the square root of 18. All right, let's try another example, and then we're gonna just try 2 more. So in example 2, I can see that my y variable only has a quadratic term, the y squared, but the x variable has both a quadratic and a linear. So our first step, we said, is to regroup. So I'm going to put x squared minus 10x in parentheses, and then I'm going to keep y squared all by itself. And then we said if the constant were on the left side with all the x and y's, we would send it over. But in this case, it's already on the right side, so I don't actually need to do anything with the constant. So that's the regroup step 1. Step 2, we said, involves completing the square. And we only complete the square where we have a linear term. So we only need to complete 1 square here. So when I do that, x squared minus 10x plus what number completes this square? And then I know whatever number I complete the square with, to balance the equation, I have to add it to the right side also. All right, so to complete the square, take the middle term, divide the coefficient by 2, so half of 10 is 5. You could think of it as a -5. It won't matter because when we square it, it'll become positive. So -5 squared is a positive 25. So if I add a positive 25 on the left, I have to add a positive 25 on the right so that my equation stays balanced. It's kind of like if you're doing like a bench press and you have a barbell with weight on either side, if you add 25 pounds to one side, you would have to also add 25 pounds to the other so that when you press, you don't drop your weights. So we've got to do the same on both sides. All right, so that's step 2. And then lastly, for step 3, I'm just going to write it over here. We said we're going to factor, so we only factor where we completed the square. So just like we went over in the last video, that's going to become x minus 5 in parentheses squared. And then the y squared just comes along for the ride. And then lastly, we would add 12 and 25. So let's see, 25, 27, 37. So we just combine these like terms, constant terms on the right side. All right, so this is our equation, and that says a 37. Here we go. All right, so our center is at positive 5, 0. And then the radius is the square root of 37. Again, we could approximate it as a decimal. It's 6 point something, but let's just leave it the square root of 37, make it easy. All right, last example. This one, the only thing that maybe makes this one a little tougher is that we have both a linear y term and a linear x term, so we need to complete the square twice. Other than that, it's no big deal. All right, so let's start with step 1, grouping all the x stuff together and all the y stuff. And when it starts to get all mixed up like this, remember what the structure looks like. Remember what the standard form looks like. We always have x in front, then y, like that's just how we write it. So I know that when I do my regroup step, I want to start regrouping in an order that will make it easier to complete the square. So I'm going to put my x's together first on the left, and I'm going to rewrite it so x squared is in front plus 12x. So I've got my quadratic x term and my linear x term together, close parentheses. And then now I'm going to start with my quadratic y term, so y squared minus 2y, my linear term, keep that together, and then all of that equals 36. All right, so that's the regroup step. Next, we're going to complete the square, but we've got to do it twice. So I've got x squared plus 12x, and then there's got to be some number that I can add to that will complete the square. And then in the y parentheses, I have y squared minus 2y, and then there's got to be some different number. Well, I guess it could be the same number, but I can tell it's going to be a different number. Some different number that I could add there to complete the square. And then again, whatever we do to the left side of the equation has to also get done to the right side. So the number that we added when we completed the first square has to get added. And then also the number that we add when we complete the second square has to get added. All right, so let's figure it out. When we complete the first square, x squared plus 12x, we're going to take that 12, cut it in half. Half of 12 is 6. Square that. 6 squared is 36. So we're going to be adding another 36 to both sides of the equation. And then for the next expression, if I take this -2, cut it in half, I get a -1. Square that, that's a +1. So we're going to add a 1 to both sides. All right, that's the hard stuff. The last step is to just factor and simplify, which, believe it or not, I think is the easiest step. All right, so when I factor my first perfect square trinomial, that becomes x plus 6 in parentheses squared. And then we've got a plus sign in the middle. Then we factor this next one, y minus 1 in parentheses squared. And then that equals 36 plus 36 plus 1. So let's see, that's 72 plus 1, 73. So that is the equation of our circle. The center is at -6, +1, and the radius is the square root of 73. And that's it.